Hello, how are you today? We're so glad to see you. We have a wonderful program set up for you today. Today's guest has written 3 books filled with interviews of veterans from the 1940s and 50s, because you know we love history here at Marketers on a Mission. Hi, I'm Patricia Durgin, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews to help Christians, Christian writers, and speakers market their message online. This is episode number 264. 3 ways to honor World War II veterans with author and speaker Kayleen Reusser. Hello, Kayleen. How are you today?
Hello. I'm fine. How are you?
We're rocking and rolling down here in Hotlanta, which is a little bit cool. So we're whining a little bit. You've written so many books, and they're not all about World War II. So before we get to the World War II series and then further into the specific book we're talking about today, give us a rundown on your children's books and the biographies that you've done. You've done several series, haven't you?
Sure. Yes. I have done 16 children's books. Those are for middle grade readers. They are nonfiction. People have asked me why I don't write fiction. And I said, because I think real people are so interesting. I don't need to make anybody up. So I've done a lot of biographies there. I try to only write about people who are good role models. So that's a pretty big, important factor for me. I have done 2 STEM books among those, which is science, technology, engineering, math. So those are of interest at schools, which I did that on Big Ben and the Golden Gate Bridge.
I'm not familiar with the practical application of STEM. Would you give us some information on that?
Well, it's where the school curriculums are trying to encourage students to go into careers and choose the schooling in those particular areas: science, technology, engineering, math. So my publisher, which is Purple Toad Publishing out of Pennsylvania, they had wanted to create some books that would address that particular need. So
that's interesting.
It's a challenge for a person like me when I like people rather than science. But I help with 2 Christian writing clubs, and I try to emphasize to people, don't get in a rut with your writing. Try to always stretch yourself and try new projects. And it was a lot of work. It was more work for me than writing a biography, but it was worth it. And they are out, and I'm pretty proud of them.
Tell us about your groups. Are you in charge of them? Are you a member of them? How did you connect with them?
It's been almost about 10 years ago now that a friend of mine and I decided to put a Christian writing club together in our town, our small town of Bluffton, Indiana. We were going to other neighboring towns to attend other meetings, and we thought, well, maybe we should just try to get one started here. So we did that. And then I started one in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is about a half-hour drive, because back in the 90s, I was a mother at home with 3 kids, no money to spare. So I was able to attend a writing club meeting in Fort Wayne once a month. That was my night. Go and learn. And I was so blessed by that group, which has now disbanded. But I decided, I want to try to give back to the community. I was doing a lot of writing in Fort Wayne for magazines and newspapers. So I thought maybe I can give back in this way. And both groups are thriving. I mean, we have steady attendance at each one and very kind people. I'm very blessed by all of them.
Very nice. When did you begin writing, and what did you do before you started writing?
Well, I do have a college degree in psychology because I always like to know what makes people tick, influences them, what motivates them. And then I got married, had 3 children, and just was reading Dr. Seuss and Big Bird. And I thought, I have to do something for me here because I don't know that I'm going to survive this. So I started teaching myself how to write. Didn't have a degree in it. There wasn't any real big degree at that time. This was the early 90s. So it took a long time. And, I was paying other people to reject me by sending those self-addressed stamped envelopes. Those were all required. But eventually I caught on. But along the way, I was always working besides trying to write and have a family and go to church. And so usually the writing was on the back burner, but I stuck with it. So really, I have been writing about 25 years. And I've written for magazines and newspapers. I've done 5 chicken soup stories, the 16 children's books. And then at this point, I have narrowed my writing all the way down to military stories. I am a wife of a retired Air Force airman and a mother of an Air Force officer. And I just find that the military has so many facets to it, and there's about it that most people don't know, especially the sacrifices that people make for us. So I have interviewed 250 World War II veterans, but I've also interviewed Korean War, Vietnam, post 9/11, and everything in between. So I this is what I do to support our military.
And I know that that's what you're doing now. You just mentioned that you've narrowed your niche down. But do you think that moving into the future, you will stay in this arena?
That's a really good question, because I am still so fascinated by World War II. I've done the 3 books, but I'm working on 2 or 3 others this year, and which is feeling like I'm not getting anywhere on one in particular. So it's probably not a good idea, but I still find it so encompassing and so influential to how we live today and how family dynamics have evolved and of course our society. It's just very fascinating to me. So I don't know that. I don't think I'm going to change very soon.
And it's okay if you do, isn't it?
I think so.
There are so many layers to World War II with almost the entire world involved. Almost every person knew someone who was in the war or was wounded or killed during the war. It's really all-encompassing, isn't it?
Truly. I mean, when they say World War, I've heard anywhere between 70 and 90 countries were involved. So I've heard, there's a little bit of disparity there. But for instance, I just went into a local high school recently to speak, and I asked the class, the first class, I said, so how many of you in here know somebody who was involved in or who is who is in the military today? People out of 25 or so. I was really shocked. I just figured more than that would know. But I said to them, if you were in the 40s during World War II, every one of you, and probably you would know more than one person. You would know your neighbor, your uncle, your brother, your dad even. There would just be so many people you'd be connected to, and you'd be helping. You would be helping them in some way.
I love the stories about how the children collected tin cans and rubber tires, and had victory gardens. All those, everybody was moving together, pulling together for one cause. I've never lived in a time like that, Kayleen.
I haven't either, and I actually am envious of it. Not the war. I wouldn't be envious of that, but just that community. The reason we don't feel that today is because there is a statistic that says less than 1% of our population is in the active military.
Wow.
So, yeah, I
wouldn't have guessed that. Would have thought it was much higher.
I would have too, but I think it's because I know so many of them because of what I do. But I guess most people wouldn't have that much affiliation with military. So my goal is to make it real to people. I try to bring vets to as many activities as I can. It's getting much, much harder now because of their ages. But that's my goal, is to make them, they're living pieces of history to me.
Yes.
Like gold mines, sitting there when I'm interviewing somebody. So it's such a privilege and an honor to be able to do their stories.
Well, before we dive into the book series, I want you to know that Judy Gordon-Morrow is here with us. Hello, Judy. Woo! And Shirley Barasius has joined us. She says, hello, friend, Kayleen.
Hello, Shirley.
We're very glad to have both of you today. I know there are others who have not identified themselves. Completely fine. We're just glad you're here. We're just glad you're here. One of the things that I'm noticing is, and it may be wishful thinking. I'm not totally objective, but It seems like we're having an uptick in appreciation for the military. Do you think that's true? Are you reading that also?
I think that's what got me going. We have a very, very active honor flight program here in the Fort Wayne area, Northeast Indiana. It's called Honor Flight of Northeast Indiana. And it was because of their, extensive publicity about welcoming the vets home and here's who's going. And it just got me so aware. Oh, there are still World War II vets out there. That would be something to tap into. And they have such a good reputation with the vets that when I have gone to interview a veteran, I'll say, I've actually had the privilege of going on 2 honor flights to World War II vets who were 95 years old at the time. I was their guardian, and I'm positive I was more excited than they were. I'm really pretty sure of that. So, and then my husband has also gone. So we're just thrilled. It was actually one of the highlights of our lives, really, to go. It's just a one-day thing where you take the veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the military memorials, and then you bring them home. Now, the guardians pay, but the veterans don't pay a dime. It's just an awesome day.
That would be like a dream. That would be just like a dream. If you're not aware of this program, it's all across the United States, viewers.
Yes.
It's called Honor Flight, and Kayleen just gave us an overview. And by guardian, that means that you take care of them, you watch over them, you guide them, make sure they're cared for. What else?
Yes, correct. Because a lot of them have hearing problems. Now, my gal that I took a male Army soldier, and then I had a female Navy naval person. She was in a wheelchair all day. So I pushed her in the wheelchair, and they supplied the wheelchairs. But otherwise, with my man, he just needed to know where the restrooms were, and I got his food for him and brought it to him and things like that.
Because their energy level is low, isn't it? They're senior citizens.
Well, until they get home. When we got home and came into the airport, and our Fort Wayne area, we have about 3,000 people who show up to welcome the vets home at the end of every honor flight.
I love that.
Yes. And I've been there before, and that was fun until I got to go as a guardian. I said, now that's the more fun right there. And I was just so tired because we had been up since 4 a.m. It was probably close to 10 o'clock, between 9 and 10 usually. And the vets, my guy got up out of his wheelchair and didn't want to sit there as I wheeled him through. He wanted to walk through all the people. It's just so, it's like a big party for us. We're one there for them, but we come home feeling thrilled.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I am so interested. We'll just say, Lord, may I do that one day? Oh, well, here's the problem. I'm not sure they would allow someone who's vision impaired to be a guardian. That might be a downer.
That I don't know. I really don't know. They don't allow spouses for the obvious reason that they might not have the energy to push in a wheelchair. But, all you can do is apply, and they'll let you know.
We'll see. Well, today we are talking about this specific book. This is the 3rd one. We gave our best. This is the 3rd in your series. But you have 2 other books you're going to show us, the 1st and the 2nd in the series?
I will be glad to do that. My very first book is called We Fought to Win. American World War II Veterans Share Their Stories. And number 2 is They Did It for Honor, Stories of American World War II Veterans. And what is significant about the covers is that all of the photos, including this one here, are photos from veterans in the book. And to include that because I feel like they're the stars.
Yes.
They're the ones that enabled me to have a book to put together. Wanted them to know how proud of them I am. So, and on the back as well, there are additional photos. This is I think it's a C-47. I always try to remember.
Looks like it.
It's a photo from Okinawa. And then on the back, these are some letters that one of my gals had received. So, yeah.
And here's the third book. And the
Yes,
book is
yes.
chock full. Now, we were going to talk about the cover in just a half a minute, but the book is chock full of photographs from the veterans.
Yes.
So you get to see them today. You get to see them in uniform from years past.
Mhm.
Other interesting things. Here's a photograph of work camps in Europe that this veteran made available to you. This is a large print, which I particularly appreciate. And you also said that you wrote it for sixth grade level.
Yes.
So, because it's great for libraries. I mean, children can read about people they've never heard about, or their grandfather, their great grandfather, or fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
This is so many applications.
I have a huge interest in instilling patriotism in our young people. I've never known our country to be so wishy-washy with patriotism as we seem to be now. And I'm getting fairly alarmed and angry. So this is my, that's another goal with these books, is to encourage at least middle school, high school, to put them into their libraries and to encourage kids to read them. They're written for the non-military person.
That's another important point.
Military,
Yes.
But I made them as easy as I could for people to understand, but still keep them interesting. So,
Yes. I appreciate that you get the specific details, but if the person doesn't know what that military phrase means, you just move along and you just explain, and it's no big deal.
yeah, I tried to do that. Mm-hmm.
Judy Gordon-Morrow has a comment. She said, my dad was a World War II vet, and I love what you're doing and interviewing and writing about them. I have heard about the honor flights, and I love how that is going on for our dear veterans. I'm saddened how many are dying daily and their stories with them. Bless you, she says.
Well, and that's another challenge is, I'd love to be out there interviewing every day, but the whole thing comes down to is when I hear about a veteran, I say, first of all, is he willing? Because I have been told no by veterans that they, even after 70 plus years, they still don't want to share. Never, ever harass anybody. Just say, well, thank you for your service. If you do ever change your mind, please let me know.
Yeah.
And then, so they can either tell me no, or I say, are they able? Because, of course, there are some who just don't have the health right now to do it.
And as I understand it, there's a tension for you between capturing as many as you can and getting the book that includes their stories printed before they pass on.
Yes, actually, if I could clone myself, that'd be pretty helpful. Because that's a huge reason why I choose to self-publish and not pursue a regular publisher, because I can't see waiting 2 and 3 years to try to get this man's book in his hands, not be here next month. And I actually read the obituaries every day just to kind of try to keep up. But it is a sad fact. They are in their middle 90s right now. 94, 92 would be pretty young. I have people 100 years old. That's what this plane came from, a man who was 100 years old when I interviewed him. So it's a challenge to interview people that old as well.
Yes.
The interviews are pretty long because they have to stop and think, where was I? Where did I go? What year was it? What was the place? And then sometimes I always have to go back and check on it too, just to make sure they told me what's true, or, it's not that I'm doubting them. It's just been a long time. So I just want to make the story as accurate and interesting for their sakes as possible.
My husband and our family, our daughters, we're from Chattanooga, is our hometown. That's not where we live and haven't lived there a long time, but our hometown is there. And one of the few military burial cemeteries.
Oh, okay.
So when we left back in the late 90s, I believe it was early 90s, late 90s, they were already so tight on space that you had to get your plot. You had to apply for a plot years before you would need it. And they couldn't guarantee it just because at that time, in those years when our girls were growing up and we homeschooled them, we would go to the cemetery and we would look and guess at stories.
Yes.
Based upon the information on the headstones and so forth. And
good for you.
They said that in those years, 10,000 vets were dying a day.
Oh.
And that was 25 years ago.
Well, there's not that many dying per day because there's not that many left.
Yes.
So when I do find one, it's just like it's a treasure.
Of course. I want to talk quickly before we move on about these gorgeous covers, because as soon as I saw this cover, I knew I wanted to interview you. And I was going to like this book.
Good.
Great source, which you don't have that handy yet. You're going to see if you can find the source for the person who helped you with these covers. But tell us about him quickly, please.
I'm in one of my writing clubs with a man who is a poet on Fiverr. Now, let me spell that. It's the number 5, F as in Frank, IV as in Victor, ERR.com. And that might be a new program for a lot of your viewers, but it's a source of finding people who are talented in certain areas that I'm not, and going to them and paying them. And they initially started out, you would pay them $5, small amount of work. And of course, I pay my book designer more than that, but that is how I found him. And he had a whole bunch of positive reviews, and I liked his work. He could display some of his covers there. And so I contacted him, and he did all 3 of mine. And I'm just really thrilled. And of course, there were times when I wanted something changed. He was very agreeable to that. He would do it. Now, I can't say we got it done in a week. I wouldn't say that. No promises on that. But I would say under a month. You got to allow them time to get other things done, but because I think he is pretty busy, but he was very respectful. He was not hard to work with at all. I would highly recommend him.
And you got 3 covers done in a month?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, I did one at a time. In fact, my first book was in 2014. My second book was 2017. And then the third book is 2018. But this year I'm working on a couple at a time. He might go crazy, but I'm going to be as easy on him as I can be.
I'm glad that you mentioned those publication dates, because I pulled them from Amazon, your Amazon author page, and they all say 2018.
Oh, okay.
Information.
Okay.
And they don't line up the months. They're not consecutive, but they're all in 2018. So just a little tidbit if you wanted to.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
I was wondering how because you say elsewhere that it takes you 9 months approximately on average to write a book. But according to Amazon, you wrote 3 last year, and I was really impressed.
That was when I had 3 clones, So. Oh, no. No, in fact, I will say this, that I did have a lot of the interviews done for, let's say, book 2 and 3, because there were a couple years in between. So I had done more interviews. I just hadn't put them into a book.
Yeah.
By the time I start a book shortly after Christmas, and I try to have it done by August, September, and we're going to be talking about book launches. My book launch is in around November because of Veterans Day. So I want to have the book done by like Labor Day. So I have to really have the writing done as much as possible. There's so much other.
It's a natural launch date, isn't it?
It is. It really does help, because when you are your own editor, that's really easy to just let those deadlines slide. But I've been a writer long enough that if I don't have a deadline, I go crazy. I'm just so tuned to having, because I've done weekly columns for newspapers, and I was working at the same time. So I was just, making it work, and it did. It worked.
I love the one that I have. I will be taking that with me when I would take this to the beach on a trip. Of course, here at the house as well, but I don't have a lot of free time when I'm home. I have many projects to do. But when I know I'm going to have free time, this would be a perfect book. And I like the fact that it's workbook size is 8.5 by 11. So
Yes.
the pages, I don't have to fight the pages. They naturally open and stay open and so forth, and
Yes.
keep us engaged. The stories themselves are so engaging, aren't they?
Yes. Well, and I do, so far in all of 3 books, I have every branch, and I have men and women. Now,
I appreciate that.
much fewer women than men, but it's very important to me to include them as much as possible. At this point, I really don't have any women left on a list, to go and interview. Found any others. So
if you know someone, viewers, who was in World War II, a female veteran, and she doesn't have to be a combatant. There weren't many or any, but you interview support personnel, administrative. I mean, if they served, they're eligible.
Correct. Right? Yes. In fact, women didn't go into combat back then, and they were all volunteers. They enlisted. There was no draft for women.
One of the things that I love so much is the WASPs. And I've heard that term because I like history, so I've heard that term, but never realized that I knew that they served on the continental United States, but I didn't realize that their purpose was to serve. I thought it was just by default. But they served moving military planes and machinery and so forth. So they had a purpose. Of course, we knew that they did, but I didn't know what specifically it was.
Ferrying planes. Sometimes the planes didn't even work well. There are 2, let me just mention, 2 WASP stories in my first book. And this is one of the gals right here. Her name was Margaret Ringenberg. She is actually featured in Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation. Seriously. And she lived an hour from me.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm friends with her daughter, and we had arranged an interview. She did pass in 2008, but I did get to interview her before that.
Oh.
Then there is another story of a WASP in here, and my husband got very close to her. She had the most beautiful blue eyes, so I had to watch him around her. On the back of my 3rd book is my 3rd WASP. I didn't have any in book 2, but I had found another one. And now we did that phone call interview, which I prefer as much as possible to do them in person. I will go to their home or wherever they're living to do the interview. That is my preference. But he is related to a friend of mine, but she's across country, so we did it by phone. But it worked. It worked well. She's very active yet. So, there's just magnificent stories. This is the gal that I took on the honor flight, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah. So when you do your own books, you can just thing you want on the cover. So
that's true.
And she's still living. She's 98.
I've pulled 3 stories from the book, and one is Elizabeth Betty that we just saw on the back cover.
Yes, Debro. Yes.
We'll talk about her in just a few minutes. And the first one, Dr. Asada, and then the 3rd or the 5th one, George Banky. So we can, we won't go elaborately, but they're so interesting. We can't not share some of these stories with you, viewers.
Good.
Let me see who we've got over here. Lindsay Reusser, I believe you might know her. She says your books are amazing, and she's very proud of you. Nice.
She helped me. That is my daughter. And she came home to help me with my last 2 book launches. So she was in charge of me. Making sure I breathed. Keep me drinking water and get me water. So
let me see. We've got a lot to cover, and we're not going to get it all, and that's okay. I always have more than we could possibly cover. So that's much better than the alternative. But you and your husband recently went on a tour of Europe and saw some of these sites, war sites and war memorials. Tell us about that, please.
Oh boy, how much time do you have? Because we can't stop talking about it. We had so much fun. We went on a World War II tour of Europe. And 10 days in country. We did France, Germany, Belgium, and Luxembourg, 2,000 miles in 10 days. On June 6th, we were on Omaha Beach, Utah Beach, and there are 3 additional beaches, which, no. We went to Paris and found out why Paris was not extensively bombed. It was because Hitler loved Paris and the beautiful buildings, but his plans were to build up Berlin. Now, this is one theory, by the way. So his plans were to build up Berlin to make it even more beautiful, German city, more beautiful than a French city. See, so that's a theory we've heard. We stood in a foxhole that would have been in Belgium, that would have been part of the Battle of the Bulge. That's when I go do speaking. That is my signature slide that I always start with. I say, no matter if I'm interviewing someone who served in the European theater or the Pacific theater, they always talk to me about how important it was to be in a foxhole. Because it was just about their only sanctuary, that they didn't have buildings to go into at night or even during a battle. And the Battle of the Bulge, the ground was completely frozen. I don't know how they got their little, shovels out of their back. And
those tiny little shovels. You'd think that they were useless, but they actually worked.
Yes.
And saved lives.
Oh, gosh. And then we went to the Eagle's Nest, which is Hitler's retreat center at the top.
We went to the Eagle's Nest.
We did. That was very cool. Yeah, that was really neat. We went to Nuremberg, which, I'm thinking, okay, put all these Nazis in jail and and we never want to see them again. We were standing in an actual courtroom that had been used. And I found out that not all the Nazis were put to death or even in prison for the rest of their lives. Surprised about that. We went into the war room in Reims, France, where the Germans had come to sign the surrender. That was neat. So we did like 10 things every day. So we were totally exhausted, but totally excited. Can happen both ways. So when I do speaking, we took 1,100 photos, and I have siphoned it down to about 30. And I do speaking engagements at libraries, civic groups, and I say, I'm saving you a lot of money, a lot of effort, driving, and just making it so, I hope, so real to them. Where we were, the men I've written about, were on those beaches and stormed those beaches and had to face those gun emplacements. And oh gosh, I don't know how anybody survived, period.
At 17, 18, 19 years old.
Yes. Yeah. Many of them lied about their ages. They didn't have birth certificates to prove. They were so anxious to go because they wanted to serve their country. But on the other hand, they had just come off the Depression and they didn't even have steady jobs, a lot of them. They had paychecks, 3 squares and a cot where their next meal was coming from. They had uniforms that looked, spiffy, and they had rank. They were facing some big challenges, but, they, for the most part, all of them have told me they were glad they did it. They'd do it again if they could.
Yeah.
They believe we should have a draft today, but we won't go into all that. But and, I just put their comments in there. I don't judge them for anything they say. That's just not my job. My job is to put down what they tell me.
Because the books are, it's about their message, not your message, right?
Correct. Yes. And, they do have a lot of common thoughts, like what I just shared. That's very common. This must have been a saying back then. I wouldn't give a nickel for it, but I'd do it all over again. I forget now how they say that, but they were all glad that they did it. There's very few that wish they hadn't done it. And of course, there was the GI Bill. These guys were, almost all of them that I've interviewed from here in the Midwest were poor farm boys. And most of them, well, at least half of them quit school. They couldn't stay in school because they were needed on the farm. So they had given no thought to ever going to college. Learned a lot of skills in the military, and a lot of them then went to school to be engineers and lived very well. They got jobs as mechanical engineers, and they had families and did well for themselves. So the GI Bill helped them a lot.
Of course, we had the cultural interaction that had never taken place before, and it changed the face of America, didn't it?
It did. There were a lot of people that, are you talking about where they didn't want to go to war, but then they all bonded together?
I'm sorry. I'm talking about people who had never met an African American, Italians who had never met Norwegians.
Yes. That was, actually, I've only had the opportunity to interview 2 African Americans. One is in book 2. The other one is this gentleman here on the cover of book 3. Was a Marine who served in the Pacific. And he was, very interesting. He was a Montford Point Marine, which I think that's North Carolina. I should verify.
I think so too, but I don't know.
And the African Americans went through their basic training separate from the white ones. Mm-hmm. Had a white drill instructor.
Yep.
Now, what's funny is as the war went on, they had more African American drill instructors, and this man here said they were actually harder on us than the white ones had been, because they said, you've got to prove yourself. We're not going to let anybody down and say you're not as good. Mm-hmm. And he is just the most gentle person today. We're still in contact. He is another one I had to do by phone. But, and by the way, I stay in contact with my vets as much as possible.
Oh.
And the birthday cards, I have an Excel file with birthdays and Christmas cards. And I try to visit the ones that are local.
Uh-huh.
So very proud of them.
We have another comment. Excuse me. Judy Gordon-Morrow says, wow, that World War II trip sounds amazing. I so agree, Judy. She says that she's so glad that you and your husband got to do that together. Mm-hmm. Janet McHenry's here. Hello, Janet. She says, bless you, Kayleen Reusser, in your work. She's daughter of a World War II veteran, wife of a veteran, mom and mom-in-law, excuse me, of Afghanistan war veterans.
Wow.
Excuse me. There's a common thread when you're in a group of people and you find out that you're standing beside or sitting across from someone who is a vet or loves a vet, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. Automatic. We were at a luau last week when we did go to Hawaii, and there were 2 young men across from us. We didn't know them at all. One of them was a current cadet at the Naval Academy, and the other one was at West Point. And we both, brightened up because our son had attended the Air Force Academy. Uh-huh. He said, hey, we know you're working your butt off there, but you keep at it. We are very proud of you. I felt like, of all the people in that whole area, we had hundreds of people at the luau. We were the only ones who could have told them, we know what you're going through.
Yes.
Pretty challenging to be at the academies, but it'll be worth it.
Kathy Dooling-Schaus says your dedication is inspiring. I agree. You do it for the love of them, don't you? And for the love of the military and the patriotic aspect of it.
I do. I truly do. And I feel like, whatever we can do to help preserve our military heritage is important. I so wish I had started even 10 years earlier, but I just have to look at it and say, at least I started when I did, and I have 150 stories we didn't have before. Mm-hmm. And you just, everybody could be doing a little bit, and it's up. So we just can't look back and say, oh, I missed so many. But, we've got this many.
It'd be interesting to see how the Lord uses these books and these stories in your life and in the country, what the opportunities that he may give you in the years to come, because you've done this now. And I know that's a maybe is not why you're doing this. You're doing it for the ones who are living now and have lived. But he never wastes anything. So you have this love. He's planted it within you, and it will reap rewards even after they have passed. I'm sure of it.
Thank you. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be very depressed when they do.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm losing them. I said before, but when the last one's gone, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've it, and I thought, I got to gear up for that.
Well, they'll be grieving, I'm sure, and then he'll give you he'll give you your next
Yes.
your next assignment. So the very first, I want to highlight 3, and we'll get to the marketing element. Let me see if there was another comment there really quickly. Oh, okay, we're good. In this book, this is the 3rd in the series. We gave our best. And each book, if you're just joining us, each book is by Kayleen Reusser. And she's authored multiple books, multiple series, and multiple books within them. This is a compilation of stories from World War II, specifically men and women, combatants and non-combatants, so that we can capture in writing the stories of these people who are dying at a complete, what am I trying to say? Quick is fast pace.
Yes.
Fast pace. We have to capture this before they're gone, because once they're gone, often their stories are gone. And I've listened to people's stories all my life, Kayleen. And I found that people will tell a stranger sometimes something that they wouldn't tell a family member. There's a distance and an objectivity.
Yes.
A safety zone that they wouldn't tell. A stranger won't judge them. All kinds of different reasons people have to be open to a stranger or someone that is an acquaintance, that they would not share that same story. Do you find that family members come to you or make remarks or emails? I never knew that about my dad or husband or brother.
All the time. All the time people tell me that. And, the thing is, I don't want to fault the families, because sometimes guys will say, well, this is the first time I've told my story. But that doesn't mean that their families never asked.
Oh, yes.
Just that dad didn't want to share at that point in time. And all I can think of is that either the honor flights have shown them that we are interested in honoring them, or they're just reaching that point where there's nobody else around now their age. They don't know very many World War II vets. Most of them that I've talked to don't know any other World War II vets still living. So feel pretty alone. And I'm just wondering if that has contributed to them being willing to talk to me. So, and if family members want to be there, I have no problems with that. If veterans okay with that.
Yeah.
Yes, it has been where they have told me, thank you for doing this, because we never heard that before. And I of course, I never want to cause a friction or anything between them. I just tell them, thank you for telling me, because it does help. I mean, it's quite a bit of work, then coming home and transcribing the notes and figuring out what to put in and what to open the story with and so on. But, that's what I feel like all my years of writing has helped to kind of put these stories in place.
That makes perfect sense. You know how to sequence, all the parts of it are in place. And Christ is good at that, isn't he? He teaches us what seems to be random skills throughout X number of years. And then an opportunity comes that requires all of those skills he's taught us. We didn't have a purpose for them collectively, and now we do. And it was all the pieces were from him.
Very thankful for that. And I say too that when I do have anybody who mentions anything about going to church or how God took care of them, I put those in the stories.
Oh.
Because there's even somebody here in my first book who was in the Navy, and he later became a missionary, but he felt like God had saved him on 3 separate occasions from kamikazes and so on. So put that in there. I don't leave it out to be politically correct or anything. My books, and I'm going to put that in there.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that 100%. Well, I want to highlight just 3 stories, and we'll touch on them and we'll move along, but I don't want to. We can't fail to talk about a few of them. Excuse me. This book's, we gave our best, the 3rd in this series, 3-part series. So far, are you going to write more in this series?
I think so. I have enough books, but I've got a couple of other types of books about World War II that I'm working on, but I can't say more than that right now.
Okay. Your secret is safe for this.
You'll be the first to know.
The very first story in this book, though, the latest one, is about Dr. Justin. Is it Arata?
Arata, correct.
And he was in the Navy. He served in the Pacific. And what he did, he was a physician, and he was sent to monitor the effects of the atomic bombs. What?
Yeah.
They didn't have the protection we have. Not that any protection is enough, but they had no protection. They were told to close their eyes.
Yeah. And they were a certain distance away, but again, I'm not sure that they knew if that was safe, a safe distance or not. So, yeah, it was, I mean, every single story I hear is so completely different, from anybody else's. So
I know that feeling. For a different reason, a different arena, but I know that feeling. And I love that. That's what makes it interesting, isn't it?
Oh, I even say if they were all from the Army and had just served in the European theater, their stories would still be all different.
That's right. Because among other reasons, they're all individual people.
Yes, their backgrounds shaped them. Again, they were all pretty poor growing up, so they had that coming on, but they might have been an orphan. They might have only had a mother. They might have had 10 siblings.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that would figure into how they looked at being a soldier.
And again, so many of them had never left their home area, so they had not experienced any of the other cultures or colors or let's say ethnicities, or in some cases age groups, like-minded age groups. They might have been the only young man in their area that was that age. Just lots of changes took place in those men's lives and those women's.
Well, when you think about it, they would have, like I said, a lot of my guys have been farm boys. They would have worked by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden they're in the Army, they're in a platoon and a unit and with hundreds of guys, that they're sharing pup tents with, and they're never alone. That would be really difficult to get used to. The noise, they're not used to a lot of that. So just a lot of stretches for them, but they were willing to do it.
They were willing to do it. Thank God they were.
Yes,
they were. Mm-hmm.
And they were in it until the war ended. That's another huge difference from even the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. Guys were generally in their year. They might decide to reenlist, but they were in for the whole war, and nobody knew how long that would be.
That's really hard to grasp today, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, yes. Well, and especially they had very little means of communication with letters. If I even see a veteran who's got his letters, I'm thinking, wow, how did those survive? How did they get home? How did they get to you from home? Because these guys were on the move all the time. So, and of course, V-mail, but we won't go into that. Those are fascinating. Attractions there too. But yeah, there's just they didn't have FaceTime, Skype, phones and email, nothing like that to morale boosters. So
it was a different time. We'll never know it. We'll never experience it. We have our own burdens and issues and blessings. They had theirs as well.
Correct.
Every generation has. And that's God's goodness again. So let's talk quickly about George Banka and Elizabeth Betty here in just a second.
Yes.
George Banka, he volunteered. He was a young man, obviously, 19, 20, 21, and he volunteered on a special mission, a special assignment on D-Day. And
he didn't know what it was going to be,
boat going back and forth across the beachhead on Normandy to draw fire away from the landing troops.
Yeah.
What?
Sometimes I never ever want to make the military look bad, but sometimes it seems like what they asked the troops to do just seems so risky. But, it was a completely different time, and I have no way to judge anything. But they were like sitting ducks, literally, the arcade gallery ducks that go back and forth. It was their job to be a diversion so that troops could get onto the beaches.
I had to read that sentence 3 times because it was so illogical. I thought I had misunderstood, but no.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, when he volunteered, my husband, he said, you quickly learn to never volunteer. So, but you might be told, oh, you're a volunteer, Yeah. But and in the end, he didn't really feel bad that they had been through that. They didn't even have too many injuries, if I recall. they surely would have been a very big target.
Mhm.
Hard for them to be shot at, but they were just doing what they were told to do.
And your book says that they did it for 24 hours at a spell. So this isn't 30 minutes. Run out there and cause some chaos and come back to safety. No, 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 no.
And I've often said, and I don't like to linger on it, I don't know how anybody came back, period, alive. And I don't know how anybody came back sane because, again, the chaos, things they were seeing, which all contributed to why they didn't want to talk about it afterwards.
Yes.
They just wanted to get on with their lives. So, that could have done a number to you, going through something like that for 24 hours.
And then the 15th story is about the WASP that we talked about a moment ago, Elizabeth Betty White, and her last name I can't.
Debro.
Okay, easy.
Yes.
Easy. It doesn't look easy, but it is easy.
2 syllables, but that doesn't mean it's easy. So
I appreciate the fact that she had the same training as the men. It was 7 months long. Then after they were doing their job, they had done it well, consistently, day in, month in, year in and out. Then some of the men started coming back from the battlefield and started getting, the war was closing down. It wasn't over, but it was closing down. Some men came back, started coming back. The flow started coming back home. And they were just summarily, weren't they, the WASP group?
Yes. There's a lot of interesting contradictions with the WASP. They had to pay their transportation to get to their training, which was down in Sweetwater, Texas. No matter where you lived, you paid for your uniforms. Now, the thing is, if sadly, those who were killed during training, their families paid for their transportation home. It was just a lot of things we look at with a question today. Really? You didn't give them enough, to even do that. But these women were absolutely thrilled. The 3 I've interviewed, they loved it. And all the gals that I've talked to, and about 2 dozen, out of the 250, I have found 2 dozen women, various branches and so on. But they were also willing to be patriotic, but they also wanted adventures. Mm-hmm. They were all used to just living in their small hometowns, and they knew they'd probably get married at some point and, have children and family, but they wanted an adventure. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, good for you, to combine both of those. That's a good thing.
Yes.
Go wrong when you're trying to help your country and they were still working. So Betty was pretty plucky. That's my word for these gals.
That's a good word. And that's a word of their generation.
Hey, this was a man's war.
Yes.
To be wanting to put on uniforms and sometimes even pants. Mm-hmm. It wasn't very common back then for women to wear pants. Mm-hmm. It was just not looked at favorably, even by some of their mothers. Mm-hmm. And one gal told me, well, Mom, you better get used to it because I'm going to do it anyway. So actually, sometimes their fathers were more supportive of them. So, and a lot of them that I've interviewed ended up marrying military guys.
Yes.
So.
Well, that's who they were around, wasn't it?
Yes. They understood each other. They knew some of the pressures and what you're going to carry home. They understood that. So sometimes the women were the same. They didn't want to talk about the war. They didn't tell the kids what they did. So
I can understand that, to have gone through. I can't understand what it's like to go through a war. I'm not saying that at all. I don't want to dishonor what they experienced, but I understand going through a traumatic experience, and you just can't articulate it.
Sure.
Even if somebody cares about you, and some people, go the other way and they want to talk about it. Both are right for that person, aren't they?
Oh, yes.
Both choices are right.
It was a huge interruption for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't like the people of France who were basically prisoners by the Germans when they occupied for 4 years. But it was rationing. It was huge. We were rationing here at home to send clothing and food overseas to the troops. One gal who was stationed here in this country, in Seattle, she knew she was eating better in the Army than her family was.
Yeah.
Oh, and here's one comment I've heard so many times, especially the women. They had everything they needed, so they would send part of their paycheck home.
Yes, yes.
They had everything they needed. How many of us say we have everything we need, so we don't need our extra money? That was
the level of sacrifice was unprecedented.
Correct. Well, they had their clothing, they had a place to sleep, they had their food, they got a paycheck.
And from where they came from, most of them, from where they came from, that was richness right there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So I can see how they would view their excess as something my family could benefit from.
Sure.
But still, there's a level of maturity to take that approach and to be that sacrificial.
And they are all such good examples to me. I actually do catch myself hopefully not complaining as much as I used to. I am able to stifle a lot of that. And is this really a problem to complain about? Come on.
Yes. Yes.
It's a 21st century problem, not, anything these people would have complained about. Yes. So I try to be more patient and so on.
Well, you've already told us that it takes you about 9 months to write the book, and then you try to gear it so that at Veterans Day, let's talk about the book launch party. We've got a few left. Let's talk about that and how fun they are for everybody involved, and the many details. We don't have to list them all, but there are many details for a book launch, especially when you've got the subjects of the book present or invited. Just a whole nother level of excitement and duties, isn't it?
That was part of what I did with the very first book, and I'm so glad I did it then, because the veterans were younger at that time. Came out, as I said, in 2014. So that fall, we hosted anybody who could make it. Out of 28 stories in the book, I asked all of them, still living, and if they were deceased, if I could get in touch with their families. Were invited as well. And I think we had about 20 who.
That's good.
That is very good. And we had it at a local armory, which, of course, military setting, set the tone. A local, one of my school group, volleyball group, I think it was, came and decorated for me. A sister-in-law and brother-in-law came and helped us with refreshments. I had a group that helped park people outside. So that was terrific. And then books 2 and 3 were in Fort Wayne. I actually moved it to Fort Wayne because the veterans were older and more of them lived in Fort Wayne than in my first book. So we had it at a public library in the living room, and it went very well. Out of 34 stories, I'm pretty sure we had close to 18 to 20. You got to remember, they're into their 90s at this point. And then with 2018, last fall, out of 34 stories, we had 18 represented. I believe there were 14 or 15 veterans, but some of them were either deceased or too ill to attend. So their members came.
Oh,
We did. We seat them around the room, and 2 to a table, so pretty long tables. And sometimes they had a family member with them to help them hear. And we had, of course, books available for people to purchase. And if people wanted to purchase the books, the veterans would sign their pages.
I bet that was exciting.
Well, it kind of made each book something hopefully people will keep forever or pass down. Say, hey, these World War II vets signed this.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. In fact, my gal was there. And a friend of mine sat with her to help her hear what was going on. And, she was very soft-spoken, so my friend talked for her to the people, but Lucille signed the books. So, some of these people don't get a lot of visitors. It's a big event, taking out a 95-year-old out and do something with them and take them to it's a lot of planning. We had wheelchairs from the drop-off down to the room provided. I had little goodie bags for them with water, Kleenexes, chapstick. I love chapstick. and, a little pen and paper, because I thought, what if a neighbor comes through that they knew 50 years ago.
Oh,
Get a phone number. So they had something to write it down with. And I think we had a really good turnout. I have a link at my blog post that I just did yesterday to the blog post of the veterans event afterwards with photos if people want to see it.
okay.
Because I did have people, I asked certain volunteers to take pictures, line up volunteers ahead of time, take all you can get. People get sick or people can't come, and it's better to have too many than not enough.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and I used a Square chip card reader for credit card sales.
Oh,
My first time to use it, and it worked really well.
I hear they do. I haven't had occasion, but I've heard they're very reliable.
Yes, it really did. It was easy to use. I would definitely encourage people. It's kind of hefty. It's about $50 to buy it, but it's worth it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Books as well for people, chatted with people. It was actually the Allen County Public Library sponsored the one last fall.
Uh-huh.
So that was nice. So some of their staff helped us with that.
Oh, good. Good.
That was nice too. And they helped advertise.
Well, that's always good.
Yes.
That's always helpful. You have a really robust social media presence, and if the Lord allows, we'll talk another time.
Okay.
You've been my guest another time, and we can talk more about your social media presence. And by then, you'll have another book either underway, already finished, planning a launch party. Who knows? You're busy, but it's delightful work, isn't it?
It is. It is. And it's so fulfilling.
Yes.
I mean, I've interviewed thousands of people, and yet, whatever we can do for them is worth it. Whatever we can do, let's just give them as much attention as we can. That they may not be here, like I said, much longer. So whatever we can do is worth it.
I agree 100%. I would be on that bandwagon if I was close enough. That's just my cup of tea.
Well, come on up. You can stay here the next time we have an honor flight.
Oh. I can't talk about it. It just makes me all shivers just thinking about it. Just about
it is. Huge party. That's the way it is.
Thank you so much for joining us today, I'm trying to call you Kathleen, but I know your name is Kayleen. Excuse me.
That's correct. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a blast.
One more time. One more look at the book. This is book number 3. We Gave Our Best. This is book 3 in a series of 3. Might be more in those series. That's under wraps right now. This has been Marketers on a Mission, episode number 264. 3 Ways to Honor World War II Veterans with author and speaker Kayleen Reusser. Tomorrow, I'm going to present a short live program. I'll be introducing a replay interview that was I interviewed Pastor Rob Cook last year in the fall, I believe it was. He's going to He's going to share his story and how he's serving my mouth doesn't want to work. Do it again. He's going to share his story and how he's serving street smart kids on the front lines. And what a challenge. He's made for it. He grew up on the front lines. He serves people on the front lines. He's a very dynamic individual. You will certainly enjoy this replay. We're here every weekday, 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern, to serve you, to help you learn the professional craft of writing and speaking from those who are already doing it, hearing their success stories, the things that they did like or did not like, tools, resources. Kayleen has already shared several with us in this episode. And, as always, I have the links for her website, her Amazon author page, and her Facebook page. So all of those will be shared as soon as the program is over. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you again, Kayleen.
Thank you.
We truly enjoyed it. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.